Hey folks, before we dive in, make sure you follow S News so you don't miss this video or any of the big stories coming up next. Stick around with us for the full picture. Dozens of Iranian drones and precision-guided missiles are racing toward Al Udeid Air Base, the largest U.S. military stronghold in the Gulf. It holds 20 million gallons of jet fuel and over 6,000 tons of high-energy munitions. On the morning of June 8, 2025, the radar systems were running at only half their capacity. Some Patriot missile batteries were partially offline. The E-3 AWACS early warning aircraft, known as the Eye in the Sky, was grounded for maintenance. For the first time in years, the U.S. multi-layered defense shield was dangerously weakened. Iran noticed and decided to strike. A barrage of drones and missiles was launched, forcing the U.S. defenses to respond fast. But is this a rare moment of exposed American vulnerability, or proof that even at its weakest, the U.S. can crush threats with terrifying speed? At 5:30 a.m. on June 8th, Iran launched a calculated attack on America's most important military base in the Gulf, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. The base houses over 12,000 U.S. troops, billions in fuel reserves, and massive stores of precision-guided weapons. Iranian intelligence had spotted rare gaps in the base's defenses. The ENTPS-77 radar was operating at only 50% while undergoing software upgrades. Two Patriot PAC-3 radar units were offline for calibration. Worse yet, the E-3 AWACS system, normally scanning 250 miles in all directions, was down for heavy maintenance. It was the weakest the base had been in over a decade. Iran seized the opportunity. 12 heavy Shahed 197 drones, each 55 feet long and carrying two Alma-3 guided missiles with tandem 75-pound warheads, were launched. Flying just 150 feet above the Gulf, using only magnetic compasses and inertial navigation, no GPS, no radio links, they silently crossed 310 miles of open water and slipped under most radar coverage. Their targets were chosen for maximum destruction. A fuel farm storing 20 million gallons of JP-8 jet fuel, enough to power 5,000 combat flights, and nearby bunkers housing 6,000 tons of precision-guided munitions. The plan was clear. One well-coordinated strike could trigger a chain reaction, turning the world's largest forward-deployed U.S. airbase into a fiery crater. The shockwaves wouldn't just affect Qatar, they'd cripple U.S. air operations across the entire Middle East. At that moment, most U.S. personnel were just waking up. Maintenance crews were opening hangars, pilots reviewing mission briefings. No one knew that within 12 minutes, a drone squadron was lining up for what could be the most devastating attack on a U.S. military facility since Vietnam. At 5:34 a.m., alarms blared across Al Udeid. Despite weakened radar coverage, a low-band Sentinel AN/MPQ-65 radar finally picked up the incoming drones flying just 150 feet above the desert. Operators had just 90 seconds to respond. U.S. defense systems kicked in like a brutal symphony. Patriot PAC-3 MSE launchers activated, their advanced radar seekers locking onto the tiny infrared signatures. 4 interceptors were launched at Mach 5. Closer in, truck-mounted Hell's laser batteries locked onto targets and in just 3 seconds fired 50-kilowatt beams that burned through 2 Alma-3 missiles mid-air. Meanwhile, C-RAM guns fired 4,500 rounds per minute, creating a curtain of tungsten. Miniature MHTK missiles, just 2 feet long, launched from the ground, slamming directly into incoming warheads with kinetic force. Still, one Alma-3 missile made it through, diving at 600 miles per hour and slamming into a secondary fuel tank. The explosion sent flames 200 feet high and shook bunkers a mile away. But the thick walls held. The 6,000 tons of nearby munitions were protected, preventing a disaster that could have rivaled the Beirut port explosion. In just 2 minutes, America's weakened but still layered defenses stopped 11 out of 12 precision-guided threats. The base was hit, but the core fuel and ammo depots, the heart of U.S. air power in the Gulf, survived. Iran gambled on finding a gap. Instead, they found that even partially blind, the U.S. shield could still strike back hard, and the retaliation had already begun. By 5:50 a.m., just 14 minutes after the Iranian missiles struck, the American counterattack was already airborne. From a fortified operations center, U.S. commanders launched pre-planned strikes. First came the Silent Hunters. 6 MQ-9 Reaper drones hovering at 25,000 feet over Iraq received encrypted targeting packages. Each drone carried 4 Hellfire missiles capable of penetrating concrete or armored vehicles. The drones turned south, locking in on radar facilities in Bushehr and Avaz. Simultaneously, the USS John Basilone, an American destroyer in the Gulf, opened its vertical launch cells and fired 12 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles. They rose to 3,000 feet, then dropped to just 50 feet above ground to dodge radar, guided by stored terrain maps and image-matching software resistant to GPS jamming. At 6:02 a.m., 4 F-35B stealth jets took off from the USS America in the Arabian Sea. Each carried 2 JSM-ER missiles capable of hitting targets from 500 kilometers away with pinpoint accuracy thanks to advanced infrared seekers and dual GPS-INS guidance. The storm converged. Tomahawks struck first, blowing up a missile depot in Avaz. Secondary explosions tore through surrounding bunkers. Reaper drones launched hellfires at radar arrays, shredding dishes and blinding local air defenses. Then came the F-35S, flying low under Iran's radar, launching JSM-ER missiles into fortified command bunkers in Bandar Abbas. The 1,000-pound warhead smashed deep into the underground nerve center coordinating Iran's drone operations. The timing was ruthless. U.S. planners synchronized the hits so missiles, drones, and stealth bombers all struck within a 6-minute window. Iranian defenses, overwhelmed by dozens of simultaneous radar and infrared signatures, couldn't cope. Outdated S-200 and Tor M2 batteries fired wildly, often missing or detonating harmlessly. Within 20 minutes, 3 major Iranian military sites were in flames. Intercepted comms revealed panic. Iranian commanders ordered all drone activity suspended for 72 hours to regroup. Infrared satellite scans confirmed 6 separate fuel and ammo depots were destroyed. Damage estimates exceeded $800 million. But this wasn't just payback. It was a cold, calculated display of layered tech and overwhelming force reapers firing laser-guided hellfires. Tomahawks using terrain matching to avoid jamming, F-35S with independent infrared and GPS seekers targeting buried bunkers. This was a message, loud and clear. Even a brief moment of U.S. vulnerability will be answered with a storm no enemy wants to provoke twice. By 6:30 in the morning, the devastation across Iran was undeniable. Satellite images showed 6 key fuel and ammo facilities reduced to burning craters. Infrared scans showed temperatures topping 1,200 degrees Celsius, hot enough to warp steel beams. In Avaz, the IRGC suffered massive losses. Over 14 Shahed 197 drones were destroyed on their launch rails before ever taking off. At the Bushehr base, charred radar dishes lay twisted around ruined control vehicles, leaving entire brigades blind. Most devastating of all, Iran's integrated air defenses were shattered. 2 S-200 and Tor M2 batteries, dependent on now-destroyed command centers, were left useless. U.S. intel intercepts showed desperate Iranian commanders trying to truck in backup radar gear that could take months to replace. Analysts estimated immediate Iranian losses at $800 million, but the real cost was strategic. About 70% of Iran's regional drone reconnaissance capacity was now offline. Launch sites across Hormozgan and Khuzestan were abandoned, fearing follow-up strikes. Iran's defense grid had gone silent, blind and broken. A well-planned Iranian attack meant to exploit a moment of weakness had backfired, leaving large parts of its military infrastructure destroyed, and its vulnerabilities fully exposed. Across Tehran, the message was loud and clear. Even a single shot at America's strategic lifelines can trigger a response powerful enough to cripple a country's warfighting abilities for years. So, what do you think? Was this swift U.S. strike enough to make Iran think twice forever? Or did it just buy time before the next showdown? By 7 o'clock in the morning, the effects of the American counterstrike had spread well beyond Iranian territory. Across the Gulf, regional militaries scrambled to reassess their own vulnerabilities. In Saudi Arabia and the UAE, their defense ministries urgently expanded no-fly zones by 300 kilometers around major oil facilities and U.S. bases. Civilian air traffic controllers rerouted dozens of commercial flights just in case the situation escalated. In Tel Aviv, the Israeli cabinet held an emergency session. Within hours, the Israeli Air Force raised its alert level to the equivalent of DEFCON 2, placed its F-35 squadrons on 15-minute standby, and redeployed Iron Dome and David Sling batteries to cover the northern front, concerned that Hezbollah might retaliate on Iran's behalf to save face. Meanwhile, intercepted intelligence from Tehran painted a picture of chaos. Top commanders in the IRGC were exchanging angry calls. blaming one another for failing to protect key drone and missile hubs. Field officers in Khuzestan reported that over 70% of their operational drones were out of commission, not due to a lack of will, but because the launch systems and radar guidance networks had been wiped out. In the streets of Bandar Abbas and Bushehr, civilians woke to power outages, scorched infrastructure, and the unsettling sight of convoys transporting wounded soldiers from bombed-out facilities. Financial analysts in Dubai estimated Iran's immediate recovery costs at over $1.5 billion, factoring in destroyed radar systems, hardened bunkers, and an irreplaceable drone fleet, lost in just one morning. But the message echoed beyond Iran. For every Gulf monarch and military strategist from Riyadh to Muscat, the implications were chilling. They had seen in real time how a single strike, meticulously planned to exploit a temporary U.S. weakness, could backfire catastrophically. The American response wasn't just fast, it was so technologically coordinated that it wiped out entire sectors of a nation's war capabilities in less than an hour. Inside the Pentagon, senior commanders quietly absorbed the lesson. Satellite imagery and mission logs from this strike would be used in future briefings to underscore a simple point. Anyone trying to take advantage of fleeting U.S. vulnerabilities is gambling with devastating consequences. For Iran, what began as a bold display of force ended up exposing severe fragility. For the world, it reinforced why the U.S. remains the backbone of Gulf security. And for aging American veterans and defense-minded citizens watching from afar, it was a sobering yet reassuring reminder. Even in an era of drone swarms and asymmetric strikes, layered American power remains capable of crushing threats with pinpoint precision and overwhelming force. As the sun rose over the Gulf, fires were still burning across Iran. Glowing scars were visible even from orbit. What started as a calculated move by Tehran to exploit a rare U.S. vulnerability instead revealed how deeply flawed their own defenses were. In less than an hour, Iran had lost 6 major facilities, over 70% of its offensive drone fleet, and billions in military infrastructure. Across Iran's military leadership, there was no victory, only frantic orders to ground drones, reshuffle exhausted air defense crews, and brace for more strikes. Their gamble to show resolve had instead exposed a painful truth. Even when partially compromised, the U.S. war machine can still deliver massive destruction with unmatched coordination and speed, and Middle Eastern capitals took note. Saudi and Emirati generals rushed to revise their plans for protecting fuel depots and radar sites. Israeli analysts drafted backup scenarios in case Iran tried to respond via Hezbollah. Meanwhile, in the quiet halls of the Pentagon, top U.S. planners prepared detailed after-action reports for Allied briefings, reinforcing a clear doctrine. Targeting America's strategic lifelines, no matter how calculated, will trigger consequences that could take decades to recover from. For Americans watching from afar, especially the millions who lived through the Cold War and countless crises since, the lesson felt familiar but no less important. The tools may have changed, from laser batteries to autonomous stealth missiles, but the core principle remains the same. The United States stands ready to defend its interests and punish aggression with absolute precision. Iran's brief window of opportunity didn't end in glory, it ended in flames. And for any nation thinking of testing America's resolve through asymmetric provocations, the sight of burning drone hangars and collapsed bunkers should be the clearest warning yet. Some gambles are simply too costly to try again. Finally, folks, thanks for listening and sticking with us to the end. If you found this story thought-provoking, make sure to follow S News and check out our upcoming videos. Share your thoughts, wonder about the future, and don't